our speaker today is Alan Hazelden. Woo! Now you probably heard us talking about him on various occasions, so I'm sure he needs no introduction. But today he's going to be talking about his experiences over the past 5 years of going to events, meeting people, and recently how GamerGate has affected that.
Okay, so hi everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
This is nice. I wasn't expecting a response. So yeah, my talk is called 5 Years of Networking, or actually it's called 5 Years of Friendship, because I try not to network, because that makes me sound like a terrible person. So yeah, I go to these events, maybe you could say I network, but actually what I try to do is just make friends with people, and it turns out that people you're friends with are a lot nicer to get on with than people you networked with, so it all works out in the end. You could also call this talk 5 Years of Corruption. So this talk is going to be my personal viewpoint of events. I'm going to say some things which not everyone will agree with, but I've seen how the industry works. I kind of have a pretty good grounding in it, and so I'm pretty confident in saying that what I've experienced is not so much corruption, but just the way that being a nice person can make nice things happen. So I really want to stick with the friendship thing, and that's what I want to focus on. So this is really just about friendship in the end. So who am I? My name's Alan Hazelden. I've made some games, I guess. They include These Robotic Hearts of Mine, Soccer Bond, which came out on Steam this year. I'm currently working on another game called A Good Snowman is Hard to Build, which people find adorable, and that's entirely not my fault because I didn't do the graphics. And also some other funnier, stupider stuff, like things called Shit Snake. But let's not gloss over. Let's gloss over that. It's fine. Available in your web browser if you search for it. I have a minorly successful Patreon where people give me money to release free games, which doesn't really make sense to anybody, but apparently people want to do it, so that's kind of cool. And I'm also the only person in the world to have completed MegaGurt, which is a thing I mention here, not really because I expect anybody to know what that means, but because when people who don't know what that means introduce me to other people, this is apparently the most exciting thing about me. So, yeah, there you go. But more importantly than who I am now, I want to talk about who I was 8 years ago, when I was basically sitting in this room. Well, not this room, but I was basically in the same position you all are. I studied computer science here at Warwick, and I joined the Game Dev Society in 2006, and I've been making games ever since. So I'm just going to cover briefly the last 8 years of my life and how cool they've been. So in 2007, I started getting into learning how to make games. I was pretty terrible. I was a programmer getting excited about this from a technological standpoint. Saying, hey, this is a cool programming challenge. So it wasn't like I was doing anything really interesting. 2008, I switched from focusing on making games to making game engines. I mean, that was a terrible mistake that nobody should ever do. It's I understand, I've been there, I went through this, I spent a year of my life, probably more, trying to make really good engines, and it's really fulfilling until you realise that nobody will ever use it. So in 2009, I actually started to care about the design of what I was making. And this is the start of what I like to call the actually rewarding phase of my game design life. And so I graduated university in mid-2009, and I was just getting into actually creating things that were, I guess, creative and playful and stupidly hard. And so I graduated. I didn't have this society to to go to hang out with game developers with. So I started going to events. So in 2010, I just started going to a bunch of game events all around the UK. They were mostly in Cambridge back in 2010. Now the scene is pretty different to when it was back then. But I basically went to everything that I could afford to go to and that I heard about and that seemed cool. And I made bad games and it was great. In 2011, I took over maintaining a game engine because the guy who was maintaining it was doing a really bad job, and let's not go into that. I started a monthly meetup group because there wasn't one, because I was kind of coming back to Coventry, but you guys were a very student-focused group and there were other developers in the area who didn't really fit in here, so I was like, okay, let's start a monthly meetup group for those people. I made more games. It's fine. I also made a not terrible game. Well, at least people seem to think it was not terrible. I don't like it much anymore, but at the time I was kind of pleased with it. And I released it for money, and I exhibited it at an expo in London, and so all that was pretty cool and kind of a sign that people might actually like what I was doing. Even the bad stuff, some of it, which is weird. And then 2012, I started going to international events, just because a lot of the game developers I've been talking to in the UK were like, hey, GDC is a really cool event. You should totally pay like £1,000 and go over there. I was like, I guess I've got this money, I'm not doing much else with it. And so I started to get more involved in the international game dev community. And I kept making bad games, but they started to be good, like bad in a really good way, which is a fine line, and if you make enough bad games, maybe you too can one day hit that point. In 2013, I released a commercial PC game, which is very different to releasing a mobile game. Like a mobile game, you can release it and you expect nobody to notice. Whereas a PC game, like if you're releasing that and you want people to notice, it's kind of, there's slightly less competition, and so maybe slightly more people will know about it. And some people knew about it, I guess. In 2014, I guess now I'm a actually respected puzzle game designer, which, I mean, that's weird. But it seems the best way to describe the situation. Like I said, I have a Patreon for free games, and like a lot of developers who I respect are giving me money to do that. And so I kind of have to defer to their opinion and say maybe the stuff I'm making is okay. See, this is the thing, I've not made a really bad game in ages, and it kind of gets me down. because like it's so fun to make bad games. Like Shit Snake was so many years ago, and I've made some bad games in the time between, but like nothing really so awful. And like it's great making good stuff, like stuff that people play and they say, oh, this is great, well done you. But I just want to impress on you that that's not the only way you can go. You can make stupid, short games, and people will love them in a different way. They may shout at you and say, why did you make this? And that's great. That's really rewarding when somebody says that to you. So, I mean, I say good games, so, like games that people will notice. Like, if you want to make good games, then you should go to events. Like, that's what I was doing for that 5-year period of my life. And I think it's a big part in how I got to be where I am today. So, my 3 top tips for becoming a good game developer. 1, make lots of games. And that kind of ties into the bad game thing, because you can't try and make a good game and make a lot of good games. But you can try and make a lot of bad games. But key thing is just to make a lot of things, and maybe something will stick with people. It's really hard to predict what people will like. And to get the other half of that, you need to meet lots of people. And that's why I really like going to events. And then combining the two, you should get lots of people to play your games. And you can do that at events. And when people play your games, they will tell you which ones they like and which ones they hate. And you can focus on one or the other, depending on your preferences. So, one thing I hear a lot about when people are just starting to go to events is that they feel isolated. They don't feel like they know anybody at the event, and everybody else knows each other. And that's okay, because people are generally really friendly. You have a lot in common with other people at a game development event if you're a game developer. You can literally walk up to anyone and say, so what are you working on? And you can probably have a conversation about that. And like that feeling that everybody else knows each other, when the reason they know each other is because, like the only reason they know each other is because they've gone to events like this before. So if you go to like 3 events, you can be guaranteed that you'll bump into somebody that you've met before, and they'll remember you, you'll remember them, and hopefully. I've got to the stage where I've met too many people, but when you're just starting out, there's fewer people to keep in your head, so it's fine. And so the other thing that people get a lot is that they feel like they don't belong there because everybody else is really talented. And I can guarantee you that most of the people in any given game dev event will be feeling that at the same time. Like, you get these circles where one person is really in awe of somebody else's work, and that person is really in awe of that person's work. And, like, they don't realise it because, like, both of them go, oh, they're so cool, I can talk to them. Like, everybody makes cool stuff, and if you make enough things, somebody will think something you've made is cool. So, imposter syndrome is a very real thing, but you kind of just have to ignore it and say, like, when you start thinking, oh, no, I'm not cool enough to be here, you just have to kind of ignore that voice and just believe that you are. So, I just want to talk a bit about the process of how Soccer Bond came into existence. This is the game I released on Steam this year and just on PC without Steam last year. So it's a puzzle game about making molecules. It exists solely because I met the co-developer Harry Lee, and we were chatting, we got on really well, and we were like, hey, let's make a game together tonight. We're like, just a small project, like it'll take 4 hours or something. Like we'll just jam something out and then move on with our lives. The game took about 1.5 years, but it only ever came into existence because the two of us were at a place one night and were like, let's make a game. We met each other at GDC in San Francisco. It was the first time I'd been, I think it was the first time he'd been. We just hung out all week, and then at the end of it, we decided to make this game. But I was only at GDC because of the people that I'd met in the UK who convinced me to come. And I was only at GDC because those people, some of whom were in the IGF, had some free exhibitor passes that they got just for being in this competition. And like if it's a one-man team and you have 7 passes, you don't need all of them. So if somebody goes, hey, I've got all these passes, does anybody want one? Then you can go, yes. But you can only do that if you know the person. So I met these people like 2 years before, like, just by going to Cambridge for every jam they ran in Cambridge. And then I met them, and I hung out with them a lot, and that meant that in 2 years' time, like, I was totally exploiting the hell out of that friendship. And I could go to GDC, and I didn't have to pay for a pass to the event itself. Which, like, now I probably wouldn't even do, even if I didn't have somebody who I could get a pass from, I'd just go and hang out with people. But back then, I wouldn't even have known what was worth doing. So, like, I probably needed that free pass to convince me it was worth going to the event, as well as having these people saying, hey, you should do it. So, we were at GDC, we hung out all week. Harry knew who I was because he played some of my games. The only reason people knew about my games was because I had this support group of people who told me this game, these Warwick of mine, was worth exploring further. And then when I finally released it, they helped get the word out, because if you met the developer of a game and you like the game, and then it comes out, probably you'll tweet about it. So he knew who I was because he played some of my games. And I knew who Harry was because he'd made two really, really cool puzzle games that one of them had won a Ludendare competition, and one of them had just been uploaded to GamerGate and had gone pretty viral. And Harry is pretty modest. He didn't tell me until the end of the week that he'd made these two games. So we'd been hanging out, and I thought he was really, really cool, but a fan of mine, which was weird. And then only at the end of the week did he admit that he'd made these really cool games that I loved. So Harry wins the modesty competition there. And then Ryan Roth did the music for the game. He'd done the music for some pretty well-known games, including Starseed Pilgrim, which some people in this room have a slight distaste for. That's fine, they can be wrong, it's fine. So he did the music for that and a few other games. But the reason he did the music for Soccer Bond was because a month before GDC 2013, I'd travelled to Toronto. I'd hung out with a friend of his a lot. I hung out with him a lot through the friends. And then it was like a month later when we were at GDC, and I was talking with Harry about, hey, we should get some music. And then Ryan's there, and I'm like, hey, Harry, we should get Ryan to do the music. That was Ryan totally exploiting our friendship for fame and fortune. And that's fine, because it was really good music. I mean, maybe I don't know, it's not about corruption or exploitation, it's about friends doing favours for friends. And I got those friends because I went to a lot of events. There is this community of game developers, and it's a really welcoming community. And I want you guys to be a part of that, to feel like you're part of a wider game development community than just Warwick game design. Because, just speaking personally, I love being around creative people. I find that helps me be as creative as I can be. And I love meeting talented game developers. Sometimes I meet them and I don't know what game they've worked on, and then they show me and it's really good. Sometimes it's a game I'm already aware of and I've been talking to them for a week, and then they go, hey, I made that. I'm like, what? Why didn't you tell me when we met? And I love getting feedback from developers because they, playtesters from outside the game development sphere, they might give you some feedback, but it generally won't be useful. You kind of have to see what they do and then ignore what they say. But developers are great for feedback, and I love giving feedback. I love playing in development versions of games that people I know are making, and they send them out and they're like, hey, like, is this interesting? And I go, this is interesting, but this UI is terrible, and you cannot release this. But the other part of the community is that there's not always good stuff going on. So for the last 3 months, there's been a pretty toxic atmosphere within the scene. Not from within, but it feels like there's, at every event in the last few months, there's been this subject that nobody really wants to talk about because it's so depressing. And that subject is GamerGate, which I feel it's important that I talk about. So this is not actually a new thing. It's not something that's just, oh, 3 months ago this thing came out of nowhere. It's different from what came before, though. So this is so from my perspective, this is a group which is just harassing creative people and trying to stop them doing interesting things. And there's always been that problem attacking female developers, female game critics. But there's a difference now in that that problem is way more visible to men. And now we're starting to realize what it's always been like for women in the industry. So yay GamerGate for that. Like it's not as severe. Still, female developers, female critics are disproportionately targeted by this movement. And the other thing that's different from what came before is that GamerGate has it tries to make it seem like it has an ethical, like it's not about harassing people, it's about ethics and making the game development space more legitimate. And a lot of well-meaning people, or at least some well-meaning people, are convinced by this. But it doesn't make it true. Because it's really not that different from what came before it in its effect on the industry. It doesn't matter what its intentions are, the result is the same as what comes before, because you have pretty much the same people and pretty much the same agenda. It's just now there's a better PR push to make it seem like it's not what it is. As I said before, this is just my perspective on events. This is not a talk with references or anything, but I feel I have a pretty good handle on how developers actually see things, and everyone I know has the same viewpoint. I spoke to a few people just because I wanted to know how this thing has affected them. This is not somebody I contacted, this is just a tweet somebody posted. It is difficult to make game development decisions while weighing the likelihood of being threatened with actual murder. Because if you're a woman and you're making games, that's a horrifyingly real problem. Because this person said, like, every time their work gets referenced, there's that worry in the back of their head. Like, is this going to be the time that as a woman I get noticed by a toxic community and get targeted for harassment? And that's not something that should be supported, obviously. Like, so somebody else said, I cannot in good conscience encourage people to get into games anymore. Because this keeps happening, and it doesn't seem like it's going away. So this particular flare-up of the problem has been going on for 2 or 3 months now. When it started, I figured it would be over in a few days, or a week, or definitely a month, and it would have been dead. We're going on 10 weeks of sustained, continual ridiculousness. And partly it's the same stuff that was always there, and I'm just more aware of it now, because this time it's not dying. But it was always there for those it was affecting. They just weren't making a big deal of it. And now it's a big deal for everyone, but that means it's still pretty terrible. Somebody else said, to be honest, I wouldn't feel right telling anyone to get into games without saying, you will probably be harassed. And these two statements, one of the reasons why I feel like I needed to cover this subject here. Because I do think it's something that needs to be public knowledge. You need to know what it's like. So the GamerGate that I see and experience is mob terrorism. It's stay quiet about these issues or we'll target you next. Or even worse, you have that knowledge that if you speak up, you might be able to take it if it's just you, but then you know that if you do this, it won't just be you they go after, it's everyone who you talk to. And so you have to say, well, there's this constant pressure in the back of your mind. If I talk to this person publicly on Twitter, maybe I'm not just making my life worse, which I can deal with, maybe I'm also going to be sending this hate mob on the people I love. So it doesn't matter what the stated goals of GamerGate as a movement are, because as far as I can see it, they have not achieved a single one of their goals. They have looked into some ethical breaches that they thought existed. A lot of the time they don't. There's a few things which are maybe you should have put a disclaimer on this article about a free game, which is not really proportional to the whole boatload of harassment that comes alongside it. So I feel very strongly that to give this movement any legitimacy at all is a big mistake. And that's why I can't stand that this movement has managed to suck in so many well-meaning people to give it that shield of, oh no, see these people? Oh no, if Total Biscuit supports us, then it's got to be fine, because it's not like he's a terrible person. It doesn't even matter if he's a terrible person. You've got that one high-profile example to point out. And look, no, he says we're okay, so we must be. But in fact, the end results of what GamerGate does is harassment. So that's as much as I want to say on the subject. There will be a more detailed talk about this for Warwick Anti-Sexism Society next week. Jamie, do you know the room?
I'm afraid they haven't got back to us.
Fair enough. But it will be next Wednesday at 6 p.m. and it will be Jamie, Alice and Maddie, is that right?
Yeah. Is it? I think it was 5 p.m.
Oh, really?
Dear.
I am going off memory, so you're probably right. Yeah, no, I think you are right. Well done. So ignore that. So yeah, what do I know? I like that'll be towards the end of the workshop next week. So I will probably be coming to the workshop next week and going on to that afterwards. I think it will be a good thing. I have no doubt that this will be discussed at the pub, so that'll be fun. And like I said, this has been my personal experience and the experience of those I know, but I'm happy to back it up because I truly believe that this represents the situation as it is. So let's get back to the good stuff. Being involved in the community is really rewarding. Outside of the shitty stuff like that, it's just a lovely community to be involved with, and also helpfully, it's a helpful thing. Like I said, that you can get stuff out of being involved. Because, like I said, developers give the best feedback. So if you come into the community and you start going to events and meeting developers, they will be able to have some really helpful insights for you. And you will make better games because of it. And as I said before, it's really great to be around creative people. Like, I can't understate how awesome it is to go to a place where there's a bunch of developers working on things and just to get charged up on the positive atmosphere there. And like, I've personally found that great, just for getting ideas, bouncing off other people, saying, hey, I had this idea, but I don't think it works. And somebody says, oh, well, if you just add this idea, like, throw out that bit, that's not a good idea. But if you combine these ideas, maybe that would be really cool. I'm like, oh yeah, why didn't I see that before? So yeah, like, it's a great atmosphere to be involved with. So what kind of events are there to go to for this stuff? So there's local meetups like this. There's Midlands Indies, which meets up once a month in Birmingham, which is pretty easy to get to from here. I think the next one will be next week.
Yeah, it's after the workshop next week.
After
so
the workshop, and
we'll probably be going there as a society if you want to join us.
Like, it's not been announced yet because I'm not in charge of that anymore. So yay! But yeah, like after the GamerGate thing for the Anti-Sexism Society, I'll probably be going to that. There's game jams. There used to be a bunch of these in Cambridge, which don't happen anymore, which is really sad. But they do still happen. They pop up around the country, and so, like, the 48-hour competitions you do here are great, but other events around the UK are great just for, like I said, getting out of this zone where it's just you guys talking to each other and getting more involved with the wider scene. And jams are just the most creative atmosphere ever. It's great. There's conferences, and conference sounds like a really terrible word. So these two I mentioned, Feral Vector and Game Camp, they're not terrible. They're great. They're like indie conferences. Feral Vector is like a day of talks by really interesting people, and simultaneously there's games you can play and workshops, and it's like the least businessy thing ever. Game Camp is an unconference, which means you turn up and at the start of the day there are no talk sessions planned, and there's just a big blank wall with time slots written in, and anybody can walk up to the wall and write down in a slot, oh, I want to talk about this thing at this time. And there's a lot of really cool people who go to that stuff, and some really interesting topics of discussion that get brought up there. Both of those are generally in London, which, like a lot of UK events are in London, and it's not too hard to get there from here. There's festivals. Game City was just last week, and it's the most relaxed game event in the UK, and I have been for the last 3 years, and I intend to keep going for as long as I can, because it's a really great atmosphere. I've said that a lot, but like if you go to one event, go to Game City. There's the ability to just say, I want to show a game, and you'll get accepted. No questions asked. I mean, unless it's incredibly violent, you'll be able to exhibit at Game City, and like so you can be exhibiting next to anyone. It doesn't have to be a good game. Like preferably it should be a funny game, not a good game. But it's it's not just games you can submit. You can submit any kind of event that you want to run, and they'll probably try and find a way to make it work. So it's a week-long event, and it's just really lovely. There's exhibitions, which can either be small and nice or big and corporate, but even at the corporate stuff, there's generally an indie section which has some really interesting games. Like going to Eurogamer Expo in London and exhibiting These Erotic Parts of Mine was like the first time that like I had any kind of legitimacy. Like, oh, here's this game, I exhibited it at this event. Oh, so it's actually worth something. But then there's a thing called Radius, which is kind of an indie version where, similar to Game City, you can submit any game and they'll try and find a way to make it work. Last year I think they had like 100 games over 3 days, and it was a really cool event. And then in the evening they had like a talk show where they just chatted to all the developers for like 10 minutes at a time. And then EGX and Rezzed are bigger things. You probably can't get your game in there easily. It's quite expensive, but there is a thing called what do they call it? The Left Field Collection, which is just a free submission. You send in your game, they get hundreds of entries, but if your game is interesting enough to get chosen, then they will exhibit for free, and thousands of people will see it, which is really cool. So, like, in general, you don't need to pay money to submit your work to these things and say, hey, can you tell me if this is worth showing to thousands of people? Then there's slightly bigger conferences. I've never been to Develop, but I hear it's okay. It seems pretty corporate, but if you can easily get to Brighton around that time, then it's probably worth going, not even getting a ticket to the thing, just hanging around in the hotel bar and talking to developers. And then not everyone can afford to do it, but if you can go abroad and go to some of the American festivals, there are like even more developers that go to those than do the UK events. And so for meeting people, it's just even more people you can meet and hang out with. Like GDC and Indicate are both really cool events. Yeah.
Well, you'll be giving us a slide, so we put that on our website.
Yeah, I'll put the whole talk up online.
We'll put it on our website as well, in our talk section.
That's okay.
Even if you can't go to like all the events, which is like I went to like at least 12 events a year for the last 5 years. You only need to do a fraction of that to get to know people. That's maybe a bit extreme, but I know it worked for me. I really liked it. But you can also talk to people online. There's a forum at the website Make Game, which is makegame.me, because everyone loves weird URLs. It's a really friendly community. You can just turn up there, post about your project, and people will try it out and tell you what they think. So it's kind of a way to get that same atmosphere of creative people, even if you can't go to events 24/7. There's TigSource, which is kind of the old guard of online forums for game developers. It's maybe not the best place to go now. I'd recommend going to Make a Game over TigSource, but it's still worth, if you want to get another view of the community, checking that out. The main problem with it is just it's so big and so bloated that in lots of ways it's not as useful. There's just too many people saying, "Here, I made this, can you play it?" And nobody does. But there are a few interesting technical posts and stuff. So you can get different stuff out of those two things. Twitter is great. I didn't really understand what Twitter was for until I started going to events and people started saying, "Hey, you're on Twitter." And what? Why would I be on Twitter? But it's another way of keeping in contact with people outside of events. You meet somebody, they're a cool person, you follow each other on Twitter, and now you have some background awareness of what they're working on. And if it looks interesting, and that's a nice way to just keep some level of awareness of what the cool people you've met are actually up to. There's email. You can email most developers. You can generally find an email and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" A lot of the time they won't reply. Developers are busy. They're really bad at email generally. And there's good ways and bad ways of phrasing, "Hey, what do you think of this?" But some developers will reply to you, and if you've met them, then they'll probably reply to you. If they don't reply to you, it's because they don't use email well and not because they hate you. Lots of people are really bad at email. I think I've got about 150 drafts at the moment. Most of those aren't that important. And then there's also specific forums for technology that you use. So there's a place you can go for Unity help. There's a place you can go for Flashpunk help. Any technology that you're using, there'll generally be a specific community for just those people. Or if you're trying to make an Oculus Rift game, there'll be a community for people making Oculus Rift games. So there's more specific places than just the general game dev community. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say. If you want to be a better game developer, then you should go to events. And if you want to be a better person, you should support press groups. You should listen to what they're saying. You should follow their work and support their work financially if you like it. And this doesn't just apply to women. This applies to this society is even worse for people of colour than it is for women, just as an observation. There are a lot of other minorities, and right now women are the ones getting attacked a lot, but that doesn't mean that the game dev community is inclusive for other groups. And that's something that you should be aware of, and if possible you should try to counteract that. So, that's everything. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Sure. My email address is up there, that's my Twitter. You can probably, if you're trying to dox me, you can probably find my phone number out there somewhere. My address won't be that useful because I'm travelling right now. And there was one other thing, but yeah, never mind. So yeah. Any questions?